Did you just ask the janitor to assemble that rifle? The question sliced through the hum of the training hall like a misfired round. For a moment, nobody breathed. The recruits froze mid-movement, their eyes darting toward the corner where a woman in a gray maintenance uniform stood with a mop bucket beside her. Her name tag read Helena Parker, and until now, no one had looked at it long enough to read it. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Veteran Story channel so you never miss these fascinating tales of courage. And let us know in the comments where you're watching today. The request had come from Sergeant Coleman, part challenge, part mockery. His voice carried that familiar blend of boredom and authority, the tone of a man who'd seen too many kids fail to meet non-negotiable standards. Around him, recruits shifted uneasily. Someone stifled a laugh. Someone else whispered, "No way she even knows which side of the barrel's up." But Lena didn't answer. She only lifted her head, dark hair tucked neatly under her cap, eyes calm in a way that unsettled the room. The floor smelled faintly of gun oil and sweat. Coleman leaned back on his heels, a grin pulling at one side of his mouth. "Go ahead, Miss Parker," he said, gesturing to the disassembled M4 on the table. "Show us what you've got." She set the mop aside, wiped her hands on the hem of her sleeve, and stepped forward. The stopwatch beeped once. The air changed. Her hands moved, not fast, not frantic, just inevitable. Each click and rotation had rhythm, an echo of training long buried beneath civilian routines. The recruits leaned closer without realizing it. 39 seconds later, the rifle stood whole again, resting silent under the fluorescent light. The room fell into the kind of quiet that only follows disbelief. Coleman's smirk faltered. Chief Daniels exhaled softly, a sound that might have been approval. Lieutenant Grace Lee lifted her tablet, recording. Someone muttered, "What the hell was that?" Lena's expression didn't change. She slid the weapon forward, barrel down, handle aligned, safety on. "Done," she said simply. The tattoo beneath her sleeve, a faint outline of a trident, caught the light for half a heartbeat before disappearing again. Coleman cleared his throat, searching for something that would reassert control. "Just lucky, huh?" "Luck," Lena said, her voice even, "runs out before 39 seconds. Nobody laughed this time. Across the room, Master Chief Alvarez watched in silence. He'd seen recruits break under less pressure, but this wasn't pressure. This was memory. The kind of precision you don't learn for fun. The kind that doesn't fade no matter how far you try to bury it. The day outside was bright, but inside the base training hall, the shadows felt heavier than usual. Lena returned to her mop, movements measured, breathing steady. Around her, whispers began to rise. Who she was, where she learned that, why she was here cleaning floors instead of leading drills. By the time the next command rang out, the clock on the wall seemed slower, the silence sharper. Something had shifted in the air, the faint, electric awareness that the past had just knocked on the door of the present. And for the first time since she'd taken this job, Helena Parker felt every eye in the room on her. The next morning began with the clang of metal against metal. Not a weapons report, but the sound of a locker door slamming shut somewhere down the corridor. It was 0530 hours. The sun hadn't yet cleared the hangar roof, and the long shadows stretching across the training floor looked like soldiers in formation, waiting for inspection. Lena walked the perimeter with her maintenance checklist, her boots whispering against the polished concrete. Nobody greeted her. Nobody ever did. That was part of the plan. To stay invisible, to be a presence that people looked through, not at. Every station she passed, she marked and signed off with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this 100 times before. Her days were built around precision: wake before dawn, breathe at 5, work until 6, sleep when silence finally stopped feeling like a threat. The repetition was her refuge. It was almost enough. Almost. From the center of the hall came Sergeant Coleman's voice, slicing the air cleanly as always. "Standards don't negotiate," he barked. "Either you reach them or you break." The recruits echoed his words back, their tones a mixture of fear and discipline. Lena didn't look up. She already knew the cadence, the rhythm of authority that hid insecurity beneath its surface. At the pull-up bar, Sergeant Holt corrected a trembling recruit's grip, shouting until the boy's arms shook with exhaustion. Near the corner, Lieutenant Carter walked with a tablet in hand, nodding as if approval were a weapon he rarely unsheathed. They all played their parts, and Lena, broom in hand, played hers, the quiet shadow on the edge of the frame. "Hey, Parker," Coleman called suddenly. His voice traveled the length of the hall, sharp as a snapped wire. "That bench is out of line." It wasn't, but she moved it 2 inches anyway. "Better," he said, smirking to himself, claiming victory over a detail that didn't matter. Chief Daniels caught his eye and offered a knowing half-smile, the sort soldiers share when they both recognize a game being played. "Demonstration time," Coleman announced. "Combat M4 disassembly and reassembly. You've got 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Miss it, you eat dirt." The recruits tensed. Their eyes darted to the table where the rifles waited, stripped down to their component parts like puzzles with consequences. Coleman started the timer, and the first recruit fumbled instantly. The bolt carrier dropped with a clatter. The next lost track of a pin. The third never made it past the trigger guard before panic took over. Lena kept sweeping, slow and methodical, but her peripheral vision was locked on the table. She wasn't watching for mistakes. She was cataloging movement. The sound of metal under pressure, the breath before failure, the tremor of a hand that doesn't trust itself yet. When it came to Evan Miller's turn, 19, pale too many doubts hiding behind borrowed confidence, Lena saw it before it happened. His hands froze mid-motion. Coleman was at his shoulder whispering, "Speed comes from decision, not panic. Move or die." The words cut not to teach but to test. Miller's pulse was visible in his throat. He looked at the parts, then at the floor. Then, just for a heartbeat, he caught Lena's gaze. She gave the smallest nod, chin down, steady, the unspoken language of people who've been broken before but learned to rebuild quietly. He inhaled, exhaled, and tried again. This time the pieces found each other. Pins aligned, bolts locked. 2 minutes, 28 seconds. Survival by 2 seconds. Not a victory, but a bridge. Coleman grunted. "Barely made it, Miller." "Barely's still breathing." "Sir," Miller muttered. Too soft for most to hear. Lena swept past him, pretending not to notice, but something in her chest shifted. A pulse of recognition. That fragile thread between failure and endurance. The one that only those who fought to keep breathing truly understand. Across the hall, Chief Alvarez watched her. He didn't speak, didn't smile. But his eyes said what others wouldn't. You don't move like a cleaner. You move like someone who remembers the weight of command. And in that moment, Lena knew the past she'd spent months trying to bury had just been seen. Not by everyone, but by someone who could read the signs. By late afternoon, the base felt stretched thin, the kind of tense quiet that comes before inspection day. The air hummed with the sound of buffing machines, shouted orders, and the faint, nervous rhythm of boots hitting concrete. "Lieutenant." Grace Lee walked briskly across the training floor, tablet in hand, her tone clipped and exact. "The Admiral arrives at 900 tomorrow," she announced. "I want this place shining, reports verified, and 0 incidents. If we fail inspection, no one sleeps. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," echoed a dozen voices. From her corner, Helena Parker quietly checked another box on her clipboard. Shine and order. That was her job on paper. The rest, the real work, happened beneath the noise. She could feel it in the subtle tremor of routine that wasn't just maintenance but camouflage. Every motion rehearsed, every breath measured. The janitor who'd once been a ghost was now the uninvited gravity of every conversation. Coleman's voice cut through the echoing hangar. "Parker," he called, tone deliberately casual. "Bring me that receiver." She froze for half a heartbeat, then set her mop aside. Walking toward him, she traced her route instinctively, distance to the exits, number of observers where the shadows fell. She reached the table and handed him the part, barrel pointed safely down. "Thanks, sweetheart," Coleman said with a smirk that tried to reclaim his authority. Daniels, watching from behind, noticed what Coleman didn't: the precision of her handoff, the natural way she rotated the metal to keep the muzzle safe, the controlled tension of her wrist. That wasn't janitorial instinct, that was training. Old, ingrained military. "Interesting," Daniels murmured. Coleman, sensing the shift in attention, seized it. "You like showing off, Parker?" Lena didn't answer. "Then show us something real," he pressed. Assemble it. Let's see if yesterday was luck. Lieutenant Carter's phone was already out. Camera recording. 8 recruits gathered close, some grinning, some uneasy. Lena stood motionless for a long moment, eyes on the table where the pieces waited. The trigger assembly, the upper, the barrel extension, the bolt carrier group. Tools she hadn't touched since the day she promised herself she never would again. Then slowly she inhaled. When she moved, it wasn't fast, it was inevitable. The weapon took shape under her hands like a memory resurfacing. Pins clicked, chambers aligned, bolts locked. Her motions were economy itself. No hesitation, no flourish. 47 seconds, Coleman blinked. Lucky twice, Daniels said softly. Coleman forced a grin. Eyes closed this time. Lena's gaze flicked to him, then to the parts Daniels had casually scattered. She didn't argue, didn't even sigh. She just nodded. The stopwatch beeped. With her eyes shut, the world folded into sound and touch, the familiar music of metal, friction, balance, and breath. Her hands moved in a silent code older than fear. 39 seconds later, the final pin clicked into place. The room had stopped breathing. This, Daniels whispered, doesn't come from luck. The silence thickened. Alvarez stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked quietly. Lena opened her eyes. "Recreational course," she said flatly. A few recruits laughed, thin and nervous. Coleman joined in. Too loud, too long. Carter smirked behind his phone, but Daniels didn't. Alvarez didn't. They knew better. The moment hung suspended, until a short siren blared, signaling the arrival of Commander Fulton. The doors slid open and he entered without ceremony, his presence cutting through the uncertainty like a cold wind. Lieutenant Lee followed, posture taut, eyes scanning. "What's happening here?" Fulton asked, voice calm but weighted. Coleman stepped forward eagerly. "Sir, just instructing this civilian—" "Didn't ask for commentary," Fulton interrupted. His gaze shifted to the tablet Lee now held out to him. The screen replayed Lena's hands, the impossible precision, the familiarity of mastery. Fulton didn't watch the footage, he watched her. "Pieces," he said simply. Daniels handed her the disassembled rifle. Without a word, Lena began again. Clicks echoed in the cavernous hall like the ticking of a metronome counting down to revelation. The final piece slid home with a soft metallic sigh. "Give it to me," Fulton said. She did, perfectly, barrel down, butt forward, grip neutral, the way soldiers do when handing over a weapon to someone of higher rank. "Flawless," Fulton murmured. "How long have you been here?" 3 months, sir." "And before that?" Something in her exhale changed. A door opening she'd kept bolted for years. The hum of the lights grew louder. The smell of gun oil brought the ghosts closer. "West Pacific Station," she said at last, voice barely above a whisper. "Black section team." The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was recognition. For a long moment, no one moved. The training hall, usually so full of echo and order, had gone utterly still. Even the hum of the ceiling lights seemed to draw back as if listening. Commander Fulton's jaw tightened slightly. A muscle flicker, the only outward sign that her words had landed. Chief Daniels exhaled slowly through his nose, his fingers pressing the edge of his tablet until the plastic creaked. Lieutenant Carter looked away, the smug veneer on his face dissolving into something closer to unease. Sergeant Coleman, who a minute earlier had been basking in the glow of authority, suddenly found his posture softening. Alvarez was the first to speak. His tone carried no disbelief, only a quiet respect. "Black section," he repeated. "That unit was shut down 3 years ago. West Pacific Station was declared lost." Lena nodded once. 4 went down in the extraction zone," she said simply. "I was the 5th. She didn't elaborate, and no one asked her to. There was something about the way she stood, still, centered, eyes steady, that made explanation unnecessary. The weight of what she carried wasn't in her words, but in the spaces between them. Fulton studied her, searching not for proof, but for truth. He found it in the way her hand still rested lightly on the table, near the rifle but not claiming it. The kind of respect that doesn't fade even when you've sworn to walk away from the fight. "Why here?" he asked at last. "Why this?" Lena's eyes shifted toward the mop and bucket standing where she'd left them. A thin smile tugged at her mouth, not amusement but confession. "Because this job doesn't ask me to lead anyone into fire," she said. "It lets me clean up what's left after." No one spoke. "I requested a non-operational transfer," she continued. "After the extraction, after it became clear I wasn't bringing anyone home. They let me choose where to go, so I came here. I thought if I stayed small enough the world might stop noticing." Fulton's voice dropped to a low register, the kind that doesn't rise but still fills the room. "You weren't small then," he said. "And you aren't now." The words hit harder than any order she'd ever received. Chief Alvarez took a step closer, his presence calm but deliberate. "She can see what the manuals miss," he said to Fulton. "The small breaks that happen before systems fail. The things that can't be taught, only remembered." Lena's gaze fell to her hands, the same hands that once carried lives across borders and now held a broom handle instead. "I don't know if I can go back to being what I was," she murmured. Fulton's reply came without hesitation. "You don't need to be what you were. Be what you are now." Behind them, the recruits stood frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing a reprimand, a confession, or a resurrection. The silence felt different this time, not oppressive but reverent, a shared understanding that the ground beneath their feet had shifted, then movement at the door. Evan Miller, the young recruit from earlier, the one who'd barely beaten the clock, hesitated at the threshold. His uniform was still creased, his face still too young to belong in a place built on discipline, but his eyes were clearer now. He walked forward, stopping just short of the training mat. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "thank you for looking at me when I was drowning." Coleman opened his mouth to scold him for interrupting, but Fulton raised a hand. "Let him speak," he said. Evan swallowed, standing straighter. "I didn't know what I was doing today. I froze, and then you looked at me, and I could move again." Lena met his gaze, not with authority, not with sympathy, but with the quiet strength of someone who's learned that leadership sometimes starts in silence. "Tomorrow, 0500, she said evenly. "Be here." Evan nodded, not understanding what he was agreeing to, only that it mattered. Fulton turned to Alvarez. "We're not wasting this," he said. "She starts tomorrow. Observation and instruction. Unofficial for now." "Yes, sir," Alvarez replied. Lena blinked once, then straightened. "Sir?" she said softly. "I didn't volunteer." Fulton's answer was almost a whisper. "You already did. The day you survived." The hangar seemed to breathe again. Orders resumed in murmurs, the recruits dispersing, Coleman keeping his distance, Carter staring at the floor. Only the three of them remained, Fulton, Alvarez, and Lena, standing around the disassembled weapon like priests at an altar. Fulton looked at her one last time. "No reports," he said. "I've read enough of those, even the ones that don't exist. Just show up tomorrow. That'll be your start." Lena gave a slow nod. She didn't salute, didn't speak. She simply rolled up her sleeve, revealing a faded trident tattoo, the mark of a promise made long ago and never quite broken. The symbol didn't demand applause. It asked for work. "Tomorrow," she said quietly. Fulton's voice, steady and final, echoed back. "We begin with breath and order, with looking, releasing, and doing." For the first time in years, Lena allowed herself to feel the smallest flicker of something dangerously close to hope. The training field was wrapped in morning fog the next day, a thin, shifting veil that made every movement uncertain, every shadow a whisper of something more. Lena stood by the storage rack, adjusting the angle of a floodlight that didn't need adjusting. She wasn't supposed to be out there before the drills began, but habits born from years of field operations didn't die easily. From the mist, Chief Alvarez's voice carried over. Calm. Precise. "Corporal Reyes, your left flank's drifting. Adjust your line." Lena froze. Reyes, that name, the rank. The tone he used, clipped, professional, the way officers addressed subordinates they respected. It all dragged her backward into a memory she'd buried deep. The jungle heat, the static in her comms, the sound of someone shouting her name. "Commander Parker, targets inbound." Just before the explosion, she shook it off. The fog had a way of playing tricks with ghosts. "Morning, Miss Parker," Alvarez said when he reached her. His voice was casual, but his eyes weren't. "You're here early." "Couldn't sleep," she replied, forcing a small smile. "These lights are old. Figured I'd make sure they don't blow during drills." Alvarez nodded slowly. "Funny thing, I checked the maintenance logs last night. You already did that yesterday." Lena's hands tightened on the wrench. "Then I guess they're extra safe now." For a second, neither of them moved. The air between them was filled with silence that wasn't empty. It was the silence of two people who'd both worn uniforms that no longer fit. "You ever serve?" Alvarez asked finally, though his tone made it sound more like a statement than a question. Lena's jaw flexed. "Long time ago. Different world." "World doesn't change that much," he said. "Only the uniforms do." He took a step closer, his eyes catching the faint outline of the old scar near her collarbone. Not fresh, but deep. The kind that only battlefield shrapnel or a close-range blast could leave. "You know, I saw a report once about a commander who disappeared after a supply base ambush in Kunar province. Whole squad credited her for holding the line. They said she never made it out. She kept her eyes down. People say a lot of things." Alvarez studied her for a moment, then gave a slow nod. Not of suspicion, but of respect. "You kept the place running better than most of the officers here, Parker. You keep your head low, do your work, and never miss a detail. That's not janitorial training. That's command instinct." Her throat tightened. "If I were her, hypothetically, it wouldn't matter. That person's gone." He glanced toward the recruits running drills through the mist. "Maybe, but sometimes the world still needs her. Even if she's not wearing bars anymore." Lena turned away, hiding the tremor in her hands. "I'm just trying to stay invisible, Chief." "Then you picked the wrong day," Alvarez said quietly. "Because invisible people don't get summoned by the base commander." Lena froze. "What?" He handed her a folded slip of paper, standard communication form, marked with the insignia she hadn't seen in years. "Colonel Branson's office. 0900 hours. He asked for you by name, her real name. Not Parker. Not the cleaning lady. The one that still echoed in classified reports and memorial plaques. Commander Helena R. Parker. And for the first time in years, the fog didn't feel like protection. It felt like exposure.